Hi, guys. This is Jana Brown coming to you from the Plot Geek Academy. Today, we're going to do another The More You Know. I love The More You Knows. If I suddenly jerk in the middle of this recording, it is because we have two brand new kittens and they have decided that my legs are for scratching. We're working on that. And they keep racing in and out and in and out, but I'm going to record anyway. So that's the way it works. So today, we're going to talk about the difference between page count and word count and why we use some of both in the publishing industry, why it's important to know both, all those kind of neat things. So the reason that we use word count as authors, and really this whole subject, just to back up a little bit, it came up because of a meme that I've seen going around and around and around, and it's Aragorn and Legolas, and they're talking, and Aragorn says, "Well, how long is it?" And Legolas says, "It's 70,000 words." And Aragorn says, "How many pages is that?" And Legolas says, "I don't know." And this happens a lot between readers and authors because they'll ask you, how long is your book? And the answer is, well, it's a certain number of words. Because in the industry, we talk about length in words. And this has become more and more important, especially as we have moved to having so many things that are digital. Because on a digital device, page length doesn't matter. And isn't even something that is taken into account, except when you're talking about Kindle Unlimited. And what a page there means depends on the device the person is using, font size that they have it scrolled up to, and a bunch of other factors. So you can say, I have this book, but on an ebook, I don't know how many pages that is because it depends on if they're reading it on a laptop screen, which is really wide, or an iPhone, which is really, really narrow, because that changes where it wraps and how long that goes. That's what we call reflowable type. And it's really, really important in the industry because it's what makes it so you can produce the book once and people can read it on all sorts of devices. Otherwise, we would have to create our ebooks, and then for every single device out there, you'd have to have a different format, and that would suck. It would take forever, and it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't be viable. So that's why we don't have pages for ebooks. Now, we do have pages for hard books, and generally the way that you do the math on this is if you know the word count for your book, say it's 100,000 words, you divide that by 250 words because that is approximately what goes on a page. That approximation is again based on older forms of printing where we used text that was very even. And so you didn't have kerneling going on. That's what it's called when all letters are not exactly the same width. So you'll have a T that's bigger, and then you'll have an I and it's narrow, and that's called kerneling and makes it easier to read. But it does mean that making the exact word count per page, it's an estimation. It's a guideline. It's like the pirate rules. So about 250 words per page unless you have formatted in a really strange way. So you can do the math there and say, okay, it's going to be about 400 pages because it's 100,000 words. We divide that by 250 and away we go. So that's the way you do the math if somebody is asking. Again, it's an approximation, and most of the time, they really want to know, is it a big book or just a little book? So if you say it's 300,000 words, it's going to be a big, doorstopper kind of book. People go, okay, yeah, that's fine. So that's why it matters. In the publishing industry, knowing your word count is very important because a lot of, whether they're editors for anthologies or acquiring editors for a small press or a large press, all of them depend on word count. Because, and I'll put an anthology in here as an example. When you create an anthology, kind of have in mind approximately how big you want that anthology to be. So I may say, I want about a 90,000 word anthology. And so I set my guidelines to say, I want my stories to be between, say, 5 and 8,000, which means I'm going to be able to put in probably around 15 or 16 stories. And that lets me know of all the stories I get in, how many can I accept? What do I have to whittle it down to? When I get stories in that are either really, really low on word count or really, really high on word count, it throws all those estimates off. It also looks really, really weird to have a 500 word flash fiction story in with a whole bunch of 10,000 words longer stories. So when we go through this process of putting a story together for an anthology, we really want to watch submission guidelines and we want to pay attention to those word counts because they're not going to say how many pages long. They're going to say, I want this kind of a word count. And usually it's a range. That range does have a little bit of fudge factor. If somebody says 8,000 words and yours is 8,100, you're probably just fine. But if it's 16,000, you're going to have to do a lot of convincing to get that story through. Same thing happens with publishers. They have some really specific guidelines in mind as to how long a typical, say, a debut young adult book is. They're going to say that's going to be between 60 and 80,000 words. And if you give them 120,000, again, you're going to have to do a lot of convincing. And anytime you are submitting something to somebody else, you want to remove barriers to entry. And so being way out of word count is the thing to do. Now, people say, well, I'm self-publishing, so my word count doesn't matter. That is also not true. Okay, use the words that you need to in order to tell the story. So that means maybe it will be a little bit short or a little bit long for what's expected in the genre. But do know what those genre expectations are, because if you're writing really epic fantasy and it comes in at 30,000 words, epic fantasy readers are going to take one look at that and go, you don't know what you're writing. I don't want to read it. Okay, so you do need to kind of have an estimate as to what does your audience expect? Because again, if you're way off from their expectation, you have to sell them harder. So just some things to think about. Page count, word count. The two of them really do go together, and we use both of them in the industry. And now when your readers ask, well, how long is that? Take 250, and that'll give you a good estimate. All right, guys, have a good day. We'll see you later. Bye-bye now.